From rooftop demons that steal the breath of mothers, to desert shapeshifters that grow with your fear. Creatures from Persian folklore.
Look at these weathered clay rooftops. In an ancient Iranian village at midnight, isolation is absolute. The silence is heavy with ancient dread. Inside a traditional mud brick home, a single room glows faintly. It's a birthing chamber, lit only by oil lamps, casting thick shadows against the walls. Crouching silently above on the roof is a demonic figure from local folklore. This is the All, a haggard, nocturnal crone with wild, clay-caked hair, savage tusks, and elongated copper talons. She operates on a strict timeline known as the shab-eshishom. This is a critical window spanning the first 6 to 10 days immediately following a childbirth. During this period, the All waits. She doesn't hunt indiscriminately. Her sole focus is stalking mothers who are recovering from labor or their newborn infants. By focusing on the exact days when a family is most physically exhausted, the legend of the All targeted the specific moment when postpartum recovery was most uncertain. Her attack follows a precise surgical method. The exact moment attendants leave the room, she slips inside, uses those copper claws to extract the mother's liver or other vital organs, and flees into the dark. But the extraction itself doesn't kill the victim. According to local lore, the attack is only fatal if the owl manages to reach a running stream or pool of water to wash and devour the stolen organ. This creates a unique rescue condition. If a village healer or family members intercept the demon on her way to the water, they can retrieve the liver, restore it, and save the mother's life. The strict mechanics of the race to the water turn an invisible supernatural threat into a high-stakes pursuit. It gives the community a tangible way to intervene and fight back. To stop these attacks before they started, Iranian folk tradition developed a rigorous defensive liturgy rooted in sympathetic magic and metallurgy. Because ancient cultures believed chthonic earth spirits were repelled by worked metal, communities embedded iron daggers, needles, or scissors into the thresholds and pinned amulets like this one directly into the infant's swaddling. They also deployed botanical barriers. Heavy braided garlic bulbs and onions were hung around the doorframes of the birthing chamber to disguise the biological scent of fresh blood. Above all, they maintained the unbroken vigil. A strict community taboo forbade leaving a postpartum mother alone in the dark. Oil lamps and candles were required to burn continuously around her until the 40th day, known as the Chilla. Does your region's folklore feature a specific demon that targets families in the dark? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe to The Explainer for more deep dives. Through heavy worked iron, pungent braided bralette, and constant candlelight, these communities built a structured, physical defense system to actively protect their most vulnerable. When folklorists and medical historians study the All today, they see a highly functional system. The folklore served as a mythic framework to process invisible biological peril. This logic model shows the translation. On the left, the folkloric symptom, the owl causing sudden maternal death. On the right, the clinical reality, severe postpartum hemorrhage and puerperal sepsis. As it transitions, the infant's mysterious death morphs into the clinical equivalent, sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Even the botanical defenses had a practical effect. While intended to mask the scent of blood from the demon, these pungent barriers of garlic and onion helped maintain a distinct, isolated space around the recovering mother. Giving infection of physical shape with talons and teeth allowed these communities to identify and name specific deadly symptoms that they couldn't otherwise see. The unbroken vigil ensured the mother was never left alone. In practice, this meant constant observation and enforced isolation from outside travelers during the highest-risk recovery phase. This map traces a much wider lineage across the Near East. The All shares direct mythological DNA with similar childbirth demons, branching outward to the Mesopotamian Lamashtu, the Jewish Lilith, and the Byzantine Gilu. By linking dangerous symptoms to a fear of the dark, these shared cultural monsters reinforced strict hygiene and observation practices across the region. The terrifying folklore of the Near East ultimately enforced community care. By creating a physical monster that feared light and crowds, they forced early humans to protect mothers and infants with a desperate form of preventative medicine. In the arid center of the Iranian plateau lies the Dasht-e-Kavir, the Great Salt Desert. It is a landscape defined by blinding salt storms, shifting dunes, and labyrinthine clay towers. And according to Persian folklore, it is the hunting ground of the Ghoul-e Biābān, the ghoul of the wilderness. If you're familiar with Western pop culture, you probably picture a ghoul as a mindless, stumbling zombie looking for an easy meal in a graveyard. The creature in Persian demonology operates very differently. It is an apex predator that hunts using patience, deception, and psychological torture. This fear extended far beyond local campfire stories. In the 13th century, Marco Polo crossed the Persian frontier and documented identical warnings. He recorded that solitary travelers who fell behind the main caravan would hear spirits calling them by their proper names, luring them off the path to starve in the dunes. Before we examine exactly how this desert predator works, take a second to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments below which mythological creature terrifies you the most. The Ghoul-e Biābān persists in historical records because it maps directly onto the paralyzing isolation and the lethal environmental conditions of the ancient Silk Road. The hunt begins during what travelers called the stalking hour, twilight, dusk, or in the middle of a heavy sandstorm. The creature waits just out of sight near the caravan campfire, quietly listening. It learns the names of the travelers, studies their vocal cadences, and figures out exactly who is emotionally connected to whom. When someone steps away from the safety of the encampment to relieve themselves or check a pack animal, the creature strikes. From somewhere beyond the next dune, the traveler hears the voice of a mother, a spouse, or a lost comrade, desperately begging for water or medical help. To understand what those travelers were actually hearing, look at this photograph of kalutes, the towering, wind-carved clay structures common in the Iranian deserts. When wind sweeps through these massive formations and over resonant sand dunes, it creates acoustic anomalies. The wind produces whistling, droning, and sudden pitch shifts. When a human brain is suffering from severe dehydration, heat delirium, and the exhaustion of walking through sand all day, it experiences auditory pareidolia. The brain tries to find patterns in the random noise and misinterprets the shifting wind as familiar human speech. And as the panicked traveler runs toward that voice, the desert's optics make the deception worse. This image shows a severe mirage, known in Persian as a sarab. Extreme heat gradients over the salt pan bend the light rays, creating vivid, shimmering illusions of distant figures that retreat as you move toward them. There is no physical beast stalking the traveler in the dark. The acoustic resonance of the eroded clay and the severe optical illusions are weaponizing the traveler's own exhausted mind, drawing them further from the marked trail. Once the victim breaks from the established path, the legend claims the ghoul intentionally steers them onto highly treacherous ground known as Kavir terrain. In this cross-section, a brittle crystalline salt crust conceals a deep reservoir of viscous, dark salt slurry. Under the sudden impact of a running human, the crust shatters. The victim plunges into the sludge, irrevocably dragged down. The folklore describes the aftermath perfectly. The ghoul waits for the prey to stop struggling, consumes the remains beneath the surface, and leaves behind nothing but a few pieces of scattered caravan gear sitting on the salt. A malevolent demon pulling wanderers beneath the earth cleanly explains away the quiet, terrifying reality of these geological sinkholes. A salt bog can swallow a person whole, and by the next windstorm, the surface crust settles, erasing any trace that they were ever there. The Ghoul-e Biābān is incredibly effective as a piece of cultural engineering. It served as a highly efficient safety protocol passed down through generations. This photograph shows camels roped together as they cross the White Desert, demonstrating the iron discipline required to navigate these routes. Caravan leaders enforced one absolute law: You never leave the marked path under any circumstances, no matter what you hear in the dark. Straying from the group after nightfall meant almost certain death. Caravan leaders weaponized the terror of the ghoul to ensure that even the most exhausted, delirious traveler would stay close to the fire. Fear was the mechanism they used to enforce collective survival. We see this pattern across traditional Iranian folklore. Ancient communities mapped their greatest physical and psychological vulnerabilities onto legendary beings. The All, for instance, is a demon that embodies the very real, statistical dangers of maternal mortality and postpartum crisis. The Mardāzmā tests personal resolve in terrifying, solitary mountain passes, while the Bakhtak translates the physical helplessness of sleep paralysis into a heavy creature sitting on your chest. The Ghoul-e Biābān sits perfectly within this framework. It embodies the deceptive, lethal isolation of the salt deserts. It is a masterpiece of psychological engineering, specifically designed to keep wandering travelers alive in the unforgiving dark. It's the fragile pre-dawn hours inside a dimly lit Iranian bedchamber. The moonlight is cold, the shadows stretch across the floorboards, and the air itself feels claustrophobically thick. You wake up mentally. You are fully conscious of your surroundings, but when you try to shift your arm or take a deep breath, you realize every voluntary muscle in your body is locked tight. You are entirely powerless to move. Before we survive the rest of the night, hit the like button, subscribe, and share your own sleep paralysis experiences in the comments below. Consider it a protective ward against what comes next. Long before we had clinical terms for this terrifying physiological state, Persian demonology gave this helplessness a shape. They called it the Bakhtak. Without the tools of modern neuroscience to explain why our bodies sometimes betray us in the dark, humanity had to build a framework for this vulnerability. We had to study the monster and map its specific rules of engagement. The folklore says a Bakhtak attack follows a strict sequence. First, the creature slips onto your bed with an imperceptible lightness. Then, it settles directly onto your chest, increasing its mass until you feel a dense weight, like a slab of lead pressing the breath from your lungs. This weight is the physical sensation of residual REM muscle atonia. While you're dreaming, your brainstem blocks motor neuron pathways down your spine to keep you from acting out your dreams. Meanwhile, your breathing is controlled automatically by the autonomic system, leading to the restricted, shallow breaths you feel while pinned. We can also see why trying to scream yields only muffled silence. Your vocal cords are still chemically locked down. At the same time, your partially awake brain panics. Your amygdala kicks into hyperdrive, producing an intruder hallucination, the faceless threat you see hovering over you. The crouching demon manifests when the brain's threat detection system misinterprets a biological safety mechanism designed to keep us motionless during sleep. But Iranian folklore gives the Bakhtak one physical vulnerability. While its body is heavy and dense, its grotesque, oversized nose is made of soft tallow, wax, or damp clay. This creates a test known as the wager of willpower. The belief is that if a dreamer can muster enough focus to twitch their paralyzed fingers, reach up, and pinch that soft clay nose, the creature's suffocating enchantment shatters. Once caught by the nose, the Bakhtak is powerless. To buy its freedom, it will trade the exact locations of Gunj, forgotten historical hoards, ancient gold, and lost underground treasuries. The paralysis is deep. Folklore notes that virtually no human manages to close their fingers around the creature's nose before the entity slips back into the shadows the moment mobility returns. This specific wager and the promise of an extorted fortune makes the Bakhtak an unwilling keeper of hidden riches as well as a tormentor. The attack ends abruptly, whether it's broken by a final twitch of a finger, a rooster crowing, or the first ray of dawn's sunlight. The heavy atmosphere lifts. As you recover your breath, you join a universal cross-cultural archetype. In Western European folklore, the Bakhtak closely parallels the night hag or the Mara. Immortalized in Henry Fuseli's famous 1781 painting, The Nightmare, you'll find the same entity in Turkish traditions as the Mardāzmā and in Arabic lore as the Jāthum. We're dealing with a shared human psychological experience. In modern Iran, the name Bakhtak is no longer restricted to the supernatural. The physical sensation of being pinned down and unable to move translates directly to social experience. It has become a vivid metaphor for the stifling weight of crippling bureaucracy or economic stagnation, forces that sit on your chest and block progress. The Bakhtak remains a powerful cultural force because even when we are fully awake, systemic dread still finds ways to sit heavily on our chests. Imagine navigating the desolate trails of the Iranian plateau at midnight. The air is freezing, the silence is absolute, and the only light comes from the moon casting long, distorted shadows over the rocks. This is a landscape of liminal spaces, isolated mountain defiles and remote dry riverbeds, where human isolation is complete and travelers are utterly alone with the elements. In the shadows by the side of the track, a lonely traveler might spot something small and defenseless. It often takes the shape of a limping stray dog, an abandoned calf, or even a weeping child. The trap is set the moment you break your stride. If you stop walking, call out into the darkness, or step off the path to inspect the crying figure, the encounter begins. That defenseless creature is the Mardāzmā. In Persian folklore, the name literally translates to the tester of men. Unlike a ghoul or a common predator, the Mardāzmā has no interest in consuming physical flesh. It is an entity uniquely evolved to feed entirely on human panic. Once discovered, the creature drops its disguise, but it doesn't lunge or attack violently. Instead, it rises, stretching upward in complete, unnatural silence. Its torso, neck, and limbs elongate impossibly into the sky. Within seconds, that small domestic shape transforms into a towering, spindly colossus that literally blots out the stars above you. As the shadow looms over the road, it springs its psychological trap. The Mardāzmā draws its physical solidity directly from your rising terror. Survival depends on strict rules. Averting your gaze is considered an admission of fear. Crying out, attempting to sprint away, or frantically looking over your shoulder for an escape route gives the entity all the power it needs. If you break those rules, the folklore says the encounter ends in madness, sudden heart failure, or a violently snapped neck. The victim's own loss of psychological control becomes the murder weapon. To survive, you must follow a strictly counterintuitive protocol. Plant your feet in the dirt and maintain unbroken eye contact with the towering shadow. Then you must execute the physical defense. You draw a cold iron knife or sword, stand your ground, and shout a firm, authoritative command, forcing the entity to halt. The myth of the Mardāzmā serves a deeply practical purpose when you look at the harsh ecological reality of the Iranian plateau. Solitary wanderers out here face extreme exhaustion, hypothermia, sensory deprivation, and heat-induced hallucinations. The landscape itself is littered with invisible drop-offs and steep ravines. If a disoriented traveler sees a shape in the dark and runs away in blind panic, they will almost certainly suffer a fatal fall. This animated flowchart maps exactly what happens when panic takes over in the desert. Fleeing in the dark from a perceived threat creates a direct, high-speed path to a sudden drop. But the Mardāzmā legend's requirement to stand firm and draw iron forces a panicked traveler to freeze, control their breathing, and consciously anchor to reality. The iron trial operates as an ingeniously crafted behavioral script. It uses a terrifying ghost story to force exhausted, hallucinating travelers to stop moving and prevent their own accidental deaths. According to the lore, if a traveler successfully holds their ground and proves their defiance is genuine, the towering Mardāzmā concedes the test. It shrinks back down to a harmless size, or simply disperses into the desert wind. This resolution is rooted in a central Persian ethical ideal called Jāvān, a complex cultural framework built around chivalry, intense fortitude, and deep spiritual courage. Standing your ground against the shadow is the literal embodiment of that virtue. The encounter functions as a crucible designed to separate the truly steadfast traveler from the faint of heart. It's a psychological test that echoes across the entire geography of the region, sharing distinct parallels with the Mardāzmā in Baluchistan and the shape-shifting albasti of high Central Asian mountain passes. Ancient cultures engineered this towering monster to teach a critical lesson. Out in the darkness, the greatest threat you face isn't the shadow looming over the road. It is your own inability to conquer your fear. If the man-tester appeared before you tonight, would you hold your ground?